We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Sunday, a day of rest, but not for me. Apparently, not for you either, because you're listening to this. But I want to thank Ed for joining me yesterday. It's good to have him back. It's been a while. He's got things going on down in Tennessee where he lives. Sometimes our schedules conflicted. Ed only does the show at a certain time on a certain day. It's usually about noon on Fridays. We can't get it done then. He's got other stuff going on. It's maybe tougher for me. So it makes it more difficult to get on a consistent basis, but I think we'll do pretty well. I think he'll be with us this coming week. But thanks to Ed for joining us. He always brings some great insight and a great perspective. Um, what else? Oh, yesterday, had pretty low key, easy day, as I typically do anyway. I take it easy. I'm retired, motherfucker. I'm not gonna go out and get crazy. Although my wife and I did meet my son and granddaughter at a park. My son had to go run off and do an errand, and it was grandma and grandpa and little Junie running around the park. That little girl is fast. It was fun though. We had a good time. We did played, we swung, swinged. I don't know what it is. We were on the swings, more so Junie than I, but I even got on a little bit. We had a great time. So I was in a good mood all day, having spent some time with my granddaughter. Um, did a number of TikToks. Things keep coming up, and I felt inspired. Did those TikToks. Of course, I've been trying to keep up with this, and I think I've been doing pretty well. The idea of having not a podcast in the audio format, basically a compilation of all the TikToks, put them in a podcast form so those folks that don't listen to TikTok can get that content as well. And so far, it's going pretty well. A lot of people listen to it. A lot of people like it too, which is I'm kind of surprised by. It's well, I guess not. It's the same kind of content. It's just delivered in a different way. All right. Well, we got a number of emails, a bunch of emails to get to, as you might guess. But before we get to those, I wanted to mention something. There's a story out, not a big story, but a story nonetheless. Do you remember that movie, 2000 Mules by Dinesh D'Souza? Yeah, the Trumplefucks were screaming about that movie. This proves there was election fraud. All you have to do is watch the movie. The facts are right there. It's just all right there. They stood hard behind that movie, 2000 Mules. Well, Dinesh D'Souza was sued for defamation of character, just like his Lord and Savior Donald Trump was. Guess what? He lost. And he no doubt had to pay a lot of money, but he also had to do something else. He had to apologize and admit that it was all a lie. And that's what he did. He apologized because he just got his ass whooped. And he said everything in that movie was an absolute lie. Now, you and I knew that. Anybody with an above average intelligence knew that, but all the dumb Trumplefucks didn't. And I'm curious to see what they do in response. They probably won't respond at all, frankly. But that 2000 mules, that was the absolute proof that there was election fraud in 2020. All bullshit. No news to us, but maybe the Trumplefucks will learn a lesson for once. Yeah, I doubt that. All right. We have a number of emails. A lot of these emails came right after the determination that Donald Trump would be convicted of 34 felonies. So we go back a few days. First one says, Hi, Boomer. Erwin from Belgium here. Just minutes after the guilty verdict of DJT, I can just say, you were right. 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 And Erwin, I can say, you're right that I'm right. Keep doing what you're doing. All the best, Erwin. Um, a lot of people are doing that now. They're coming to me and saying, "Yeah, you were right. I was wrong." Because there's a lot of people that kept telling me that he's not going to be convicted, and I just didn't see how that was possible. So I said, "Of course he would be convicted." Now, I was a little surprised that he was convicted by all 34 counts. Kind of surprised by that. I'm not a scholar of trials and laws and things. I'm just a guy. But I thought if it's a documents trial and one document uh, proves him guilty, wouldn't all the documents? That only makes sense. Still, I thought they'd kind of couch this and maybe give him a couple of gimmies, maybe only charge him with 10 felonies or 20 felonies, but certainly not all of them. But God damn it, they did it quickly. They did it in less than 2 days, and they got him on all 34 charges. Truly fucking amazing. And the Republicans and Donald Trump are spinning, absolutely spinning. All right, the next email comes from Rich from American Canyon. Says, hi, Mike. Just wanted to drop a quick message and say how happy I am that Dirty Diaper Donnie was found guilty on all 34 counts. Get out there and rub that fact into all the non believers. Happy day, my friend. Rich of American Canyon. Thank you, Rich. I don't really need to rub it in people's faces. There's nothing to be really gained by that. My only hope is that next time I tell them something, they'll trust me a little bit. And again, it's when I make these predictions, so to speak, they're not really predictions. And it's not really that I'm so smart. It's what I've told you before. I take all the emotion out of it. I take all the fear out of it. I look at the facts. When you look at the facts with this trial leading up to the trial, and when you see how the case was going, the only decision you can come up with is that he's going to be guilty. It wouldn't have gotten this far unless the DA was sure of it. And the trial went so well for the prosecution, it isn't hard to decide that he's going to get convicted. It's the people who get scared and nervous and are terrified of being wrong. And they had to say that, oh, he won't get convicted. He'll just get away with it. Well, he didn't. He didn't get away from anything. He got nailed with all 34. Scott says, you were right. It's okay to say I told you so. And as I said in my TikTok, and I've said here on the podcast, I jokingly said I'm not the kind of guy that would say I told you so. And then, of course, I admitted that, yeah, I'm definitely that guy. And I told you so. But again, it's not about any brilliance on my part. It's just about settling your mind, taking the emotions out, looking at the facts. It's not hard if you do that. All right, the next email says, well, Mike, here we are, an absolute slam dunk. I'm not happy that sentencing won't be until July 11th, but a win is a win is a win. It's amazing that his blind sheep still accepted was a kangaroo court, but who gives a fuck? Let them piss and moan. I'd take a rather draconian pleasure in it. I do have one question for you, though. A local Trumplefuck that I unfortunately have to come across from time to time insists that SCOTUS will overturn the whole thing. While I have no doubt that they're corrupt enough to do that, I'm fairly certain they have no power in a state ruling. Please tell me I'm correct, or this is all for naught. Philly Paul. Well, you're absolutely right. The Supreme Court doesn't have any authority over state trials or state courts. They don't. He is definitely going to appeal it, but he's going to have to appeal it to an appellate court, then maybe the state Supreme Court, but not the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, some people have come in and said, oh, no, the Supreme Court would get involved because there are some federal issues in this particular case. That's not true. That's bullshit. You know, it's interesting. I've seen some pictures of the appellate court in New York where Donald Trump will have to appeal to. And it's an interesting picture because it has 5 members of the appellate court, and they all happen to be black women. So good luck with that, Donnie. I got a feeling you don't have too many friends on that appellate court. Well, then he'll take it to the Supreme Court of New York, but still it's the Supreme Court of New York. It's not going to be turned over. This case was run impeccably by an excellent judge. The jury did their job. The district attorney did his job. It's not going to be overturned by anybody, certainly not the Supreme Court. All right, Darren says, you called it. I love your TikTok that said, I'm the guy that I say I told you so. Yeah, I did say that. So happy for this day 34, all of them guilty. Darren, thank you. Darren, we're all ecstatic. And while I knew it was coming, I still sat there with bated breath, waiting to hear it. And when I first started hearing Ari Melber read them off, I heard him read the first two. And when he read the first two, I thought, okay, he's guilty. I don't care if he gets them all or not. But then he went to 5 and it was all of them. Then he went to 10 and it was all of them. Then I got excited and sat there and said, I got to hear all these motherfuckers. Because if he's got 10, he's probably got 34. All right. Next one says, hey, Boomer and the mighty Boomer Brigade. I was wrong 34 times. I apologize. I, in all my rotten New York attitude and old man cynicism, never thought today would happen, that we peons would get it in the neck again. You, Boomer, in all seriousness, are tapped into something that I know I now believe is really hard to comprehend. You're right, big time. I've realized with today's conviction of all 34 counts on the orange piece of waste of human flesh that positive thought and logic works. Any credibility that I gave to the assumed authority of the almighty media I had is dead and gone. I felt a tremendous weight come off my shoulders today. We are fucking winning. You're right, Mike. He doesn't have to go to jail. Today, he has lost any and all credibility he had with the vast majority of the voters in this country, and I'm willing to bet the farm on that. Even on the outside chance of him getting into office, he has no legs to stand on. No one can take him seriously now, especially in the real world. He is the joke he always was. Of course, his cult will follow him to the end. We still need to be on guard, but it's almost time to poke him with the stick. We need not just to finish these fascist fucks, we need to annihilate them. No reconciliation or extended hands for these bastards. Anyway, I apologize again. My attitude was always based on past experience and not you. Long live the boomer, Z-Man. See, that's where the mistake comes in, Z-Man. You're basing your thoughts and your guesses on the past, on history. And I've always been there to point out that that's well and good, and in some cases, maybe most cases, that's a reasonable strategy. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at what's going on right now, we've never seen anything like this in history. And if we've never seen anything like this in history, we have nothing to reference or nothing to compare to. So to do that is kind of folly, as they say. Uh, Forget about the past, forget about the emotions, forget about the bad attitude, just focused business-like on the facts. And that will tell you what's going to happen. All right, the next one comes from Gabrielle. You probably were shocked at 34, but you were so right. I was kind of shocked about the 34, honestly. I thought they'd kind of hedge a little bit just to give Donnie a win. But once I got past like number 6, I knew it was going to be all 34. It was just going that way. She goes on to say, I have no words except that I was born and bred in New York State. Granted, Buffalo is an upstate and considered Western New York, and I love New York. As my Sicilian grandmother used to say, and now New York can say to Trump, we told him where the bear shits in the buckwheat. Gabrielle. Now, Gabrielle wrote another email too. She said, Mike, I wanted to let you know that I enjoy the Not a Podcast episodes. And if it's not too much trouble for you to do them, they're great. Reaching listeners who don't catch every TikTok. You don't have to read this on the podcast, please. Just giving you my input, Gabrielle. Well, Gabrielle, if you send me uh, an email, I'm going to read it. But thank you for that. Yeah, I do that. It's not a huge problem. It's not a big problem. I can't always determine an exact time when it's going to come out, but I can do it. It's easy enough, and I will continue to do it as long as I can. All right. The next one says, good evening, Mike. It's a great day in the neighborhood. The only downer is Trumpy doesn't get sentenced till mid-July. Though, if I were the judge and Trumpy behaved as he did, I'd have scheduled sentencing for the day of the convention, not 4 days before. But I'm a twisted individual who enjoys screwing with arrogant assholes just to watch their brains melt. Now, I don't have a problem with the sentencing being July 11th. I don't really have a problem with that because that gives Donald Trump a month and a half to stew on this shit, to agonize about this. He is of a broken emotional state, and this isn't going to wear well on him. You know, the thing about it is the gag order, I found out, I didn't know this, is still in effect. So he could still go to jail for the gag order. Um, it'll be interesting to see what he is sentenced to, but now he's got to anticipate and worry about it for the next month and a half. Hope that helps you campaign, Donnie. She goes on to say, or I don't know if this is a he or she, they go on to say some serious contemplations. Trump, he still has the public support of Das Party, but is that because they really want him in office or simply because they don't think they can win their primaries and or their seats come November? Now, say for sake of argument, Trumpy wins. Not going to happen, but for this thought experiment, he does. He can't run again, so Republicans don't need him anymore. How many of the few who survived the upcoming culling will still follow him after January 3rd? He'll be of no use to them. He's going to be no use to them as of November 6th of 2024. I'm sorry. Not to mention, in your neck of the woods, who's in the big chair is virtually irrelevant if the other team controls the House and Senate. So even if the universe snorts a boatload of blow and Trumpy wins, what can he really do domestically if the White Hats have the majority in both houses? Can't do jack shit. And you know what else he can probably do? He can probably get impeached again and convicted by the Senate. If I'm not mistaken, even if he issues executive orders, the House and the Senate can just say no, rendering him powerless. Now, that I'm not sure about. I'm not smart enough to know about that. But that is signed by Stephanie. And Stephanie, thank you for that. And you make some excellent points. Donald Trump will not get elected. People keep asking me that every day. Are you sure? Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. There's any number of reasons why I'm sure. And after this conviction, there's a big reason why. There are polls out, and I know that I don't listen to polls very much, but this poll works against Donald Trump. So I'm thinking it's probably more legit than other polls we see. And after this conviction, it says that 49% of independents say they will not vote for Donald Trump now because he was convicted. And 10% of the Republican Party say they will not vote for him because he was convicted. Now, here's what you need to know. If a Republican is going to win the presidency, he needs independents for help. He needs independents for help. And he's pretty much lost the independents with the Roe v. Wade thing. And the 10% of the Republicans, that doesn't sound like a lot. But as I said, in order for him to win the presidency, he has to have a unified party. And there are at least 10% of the people in this Republican Party that don't want anything to do with Donald Trump. They can't stomach Donald Trump. So these are all problems for Donald Trump when the election comes in November. If he can't get his entire party and some of the independents, he just can't win. He just can't win. All right. Thank you, Stephanie. The next one says, hi, Mike. It's been a while, but we have tons of overtime at my job. So I've been doing 40, 50 hours of overtime. I listen every day while at work, but I haven't had time to email. No problem. First, yay, the orange shithead was convicted on all 34 counts. I was sure he would be convicted, but not sure it would be a sweep. Now to my other thing. You have been saying that after he loses in November, he and the maggots will fade away. I absolutely don't agree with this. Not being negative or Debbie Downer, just basing this on the facts. He has lost before and he doesn't go away. Nothing short of death will make that orange felon go away, even if with other trials he loses and gets jail time. He will appeal and he will stay out of jail and keep running his mouth. The press has proved time and time again that they will give him airtime. The thought of him not going away and still having to see his fugly face on TV is upsetting, but I'm not basing my thoughts or predictions on emotion or fear. Good for you. I'm basing this on what we've seen time and time again. These are facts. I believe he will never go quietly into the sunset. His maggot followers are just as bad. They make excuses and will not change. I watched how some of them were reacting today after the verdict. These idiotic, inbred fuckers will never accept that their Lord and Savior is guilty. It just gave them a new thing to be spouting off at the mouth. I truly believe he will lose the election in November and all subsequent court cases. However, he will cry rigged election, rigged trials, blah, blah. He will keep yelling, and the media will keep giving him airtime since he makes for ratings, I guess. This is one of those times I wish I was bewitched and could twinkle my nose and make the disgusting fucker disappear. Anyway, I've been enjoying the shows and all the great guests. Keep up the great lineup. Hugs, Deb from Delaware. I know what you're saying. I disagree with you with the fact that you disagree with me, and I'll tell you why. Um, will they still be yapping and will they still be MAGA fucks like they are now? Will Donald Trump ever shut up? No, he won't shut up, and the MAGA fucks will continue. However, when we have this election and Donald Trump loses and the Republicans lose, there's going to be a reckoning for the Republicans. They should have learned this before, but they'll learn it absolutely on November 5th. Once Donald Trump is not a factor for them anymore, once he can't help them win or raise money because he's in jail or he's in court or whatever he is, and they lose election after election and this ultimate election in November, when they lose decisively, at that point, they're going to have to make a decision. Is Donald Trump really worth our time? And they're going to say no. I'm not saying all of them. I'm not saying the base. I'm not saying the MAGA fucks. But the majority of the Republican Party is going to say, hey, shit, we've got to do something here. We've got to change something up. So while Donald Trump may still be spewing shit, he won't be a real factor in politics anymore, and neither will MAGA. Republican Party will have to rebuild in another form, and they will try anyway. It'll take time, a lot of time, maybe 10 years, but they're going to have to step away from Donald Trump. Again, maybe not the base, not MAGA, but they're a small part of the Republican Party. If the Republican Party hopes to save their party, they're going to have to step away from Donald Trump, and they will have the ultimate excuse. Donald Trump had power after the 2020 election, mainly because the Republicans gave it to him. Kevin McCarthy pulled him back into the fold, but he still had some swag to him. Once we get past November, he will have been a convict. He will be broke. He will have lost another election in an embarrassing manner, and he won't be a factor for the Republicans anymore. And if he's not a factor for the Republicans, he's not a factor in this country at all. He can talk and yap and do all his shit, but it's not going to matter. Nobody's going to care. Will TV put him on? Maybe, but he'll be a joke at that point. It'll be a joke. Now, understand something else, too. You talk about him keeping talking and doing all this stuff. When he's on release, pending an appeal, when he's on bail, like he is on now, he's still under some rules and regulations. I mean, with what's going on with his appeals, which will extend past the election, there are certain countries he can't go to. His traveling may be limited. He'll have to get approval for any travel or anything he does. He is going to be hamstringed, not only with what he does, but what he says. He's not going to be able to call out the judges and do all this shit while he's on appeal. Because I tell you, at this point, if you are a convicted felon and now you're talking shit about judges or witnesses or whatever, they will just put you in jail for a couple of days or 5 days or 2 days or 10 days. It doesn't matter. And then as far as the sentencing on June 11th, or July 11th, people say he's not going to jail. Now, I don't know where they get that from. Nobody really knows. And I'm not going to suggest I know. But for those people that say he's not going to prison, let me offer up a couple of things. And I think I've talked about this some. He's a first offender, nonviolent. Michael Cohen was a first offender, nonviolent, for the very similar crimes. It was a different area, it was the Southern District, but he went to jail for 3 years. He was sentenced to 3 years. We've got Ellen Weisselberg, same thing, first offender. He went to jail for 4 months. The other thing you have to understand is that all this bullshit that Donald Trump pulled during the trial and leading up to the trial, it's going to come back to smack him in the face. The idea that he violated the gag order 12 or 13 times, that's going to come up in the sentencing. The fact that he's been disrespectful to the jury, to the witnesses, to the DA, to the judge and the judge's daughter, that's going to come into play. And remember, Judge Juan Marchand is a pretty serious jurist. He doesn't like fucking around. He let him go through the trial because he wanted to get the trial done and finished. It is done and finished now. Now the idea that he might put Donald Trump at the very least in jail for 3 or 4 days because of the violations of the gag order, that's conceivable. But Donald Trump did something else yesterday, I heard, and I haven't verified this, but it wouldn't surprise me. There was a pretrial or pre-sentencing hearing yesterday that he was supposed to show up to. He didn't show up. Now, one of the things, or a couple of the things that the judge will consider in sentencing, is he remorseful? Well, no, he's not. Is he likely to repeat these crimes? Yes, he is, because he said he did. All these things come into play when it comes to sentencing with a guy who's probably not happy with Donald Trump's behavior throughout the trial and leading up to the trial. He's a very serious judge. So those people who say he's not going to get jail time, I will just tell you this. I'm not saying I know anything, but I know you don't know anything either. Again, you're basing it on past history. You're basing on what happened last year, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but nothing like this has ever happened. And nothing has happened in the way this has happened and how bad it was with Donald Trump. So to say because of history, it's going to be this way, I disagree. And we'll wait and see what happens. In terms of how much time he spends in jail, I don't really care. Honestly, I don't. The damage to Donald Trump has been done. His appeals will not work. Republicans whining and crying and bitching and moaning, that's not going to fucking help. It's a done deal. The conviction is in. They can't go back and say, you know what, we screwed up. Let's not make it a conviction anymore. It's done. He's convicted 34 fucking times. As much whining and crying as he wants to do, it's not going to help. So we'll see if he gets jail time. And frankly, for me, if he got 2 weeks of jail time, I'd be cool with that. Because Donald Trump spending one night in prison will be crushing to his soul and his emotions. 2 weeks, a month. There's a guy named David K. Johnston. He is a Trump biographer. He wrote a book about Trump. And he says that he would be surprised if Donald Trump got less than 30 days in prison. Think about Donald Trump being hauled away in cuffs, put in prison for 30 days, and for him to have to deal with that. I don't know if he'll even come out of that. I mean, he may come out physically, but mentally, he'll be fucked up and he'll be weak. Did you notice that when he did his press conference after he was convicted 34 times? As Donald Trump would say, he seemed a little low energy. He seemed a little defeated. He seemed a little despondent. And you know what? Between now and November, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. All right. The next email says, Mike, you're the Walter Cronkite of the new millennium, and I enjoy the guests you have on the podcast. Well, I appreciate that. I am not the new Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite was in a era of his own. Um, he was the most trusted man in America when he was a newscaster. Imagine that. A newscaster on a network decidedly considered the most trusted man in America. I don't know that I could ever carry that mantle. I know I can't. And that's not even what I'm trying to be. I'm just trying to be a guy stirring some shit. And so far, I've been kind of successful with that. So that's what I'll be. But I appreciate the comments. John goes on to say, I have been listening to your podcast nightly since you began on TikTok. I want to personally thank you for continually informing us nightly in layman's terms so the average Americans can understand what is going on with our government. John. Well, thank you, John. As I've told you before, I started doing TikToks um, just to try to get a message out that clearly wasn't getting out from our mainstream media. The way I look at things and analyze them and figure them out, that was for my own benefit. Because when I see some bad news, I want to figure out the angle to get around it or to fix it, or if it's really a problem. And by virtue of doing that, thankfully, there are some folks out there that get some relief. We help some anxiety out there. And if there's anything I do that I'm more proud of, it's that I help some people out there feel better about what's going on in the world now and in the future. There's always hope, and we're doing pretty well right now. So let's enjoy that, and let's not let the negativity fucking ruin it. All right, we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, we've got some more emails. This one comes from Jersey Girl Pam. This is just a comment. She says, in New York State, a felon cannot vote if he's in jail. If not in jail, he can vote. I'd heard that. But what you have to understand, Pam, is New York isn't his home state anymore. It's Florida. And in Florida, as a felon, he can't vote unless they change the law or Ron DeSantis does something. So I understand what the law in New York is, but he's a Florida resident at this point. Remember, he made that change when the troubles all started. He thought he could run from it. Clearly, he couldn't. But it'll be determined whether he can vote as to what happens in Florida. Right now, he can't vote as a convicted felon unless Ron DeSantis or the legislature or whoever changes that. So we'll see. And honestly, I don't fucking care if he can vote. I just don't want him elected, and I don't want him a factor in politics or this government henceforth. All right. The next email says, Hi, Mike. I love your work. Donald Trump is waiting, and we're all waiting for the Supreme Court's decision on his presidential immunity claim. He claims that he's not guilty of crimes committed while in office because those acts committed during a president's term cannot be crimes. Basically, that a president is above the law. It seems like a no brainer, and I think the court should have settled this right on the spot once they quit laughing. Let's assume they're rational and reject his claim. Is that immunity defense all he's got for the other three trials? I haven't heard any defense, but put forth for Georgia, where the charges are many offense for the stolen documents case, other than he believes he had the right to take them. I haven't heard of any defense at all for the January 6th Capitol attack, where 59 co conspirators face charges for their participation in the fake electors scheme. Reminds me of the old Where's the Beef ads? Where's the defense, Scott? Well, yeah, we'll probably get a decision on that immunity case from the Supreme Court this month. I don't know what day it is, but there's a point in June where it's their last day for this session, and then they go on a summer break because they work so fucking hard. Um, there's no way they're going to give him immunity, because if they give him immunity, they give Joe Biden immunity. And then Joe Biden theoretically could send out SEAL Team 6 and kill Donald Trump. It's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Now, the only other thing they could do is send it back to Judge Chutkin. Well, then Judge Chutkin can fuck up Donald Trump's life. He can force them to bring all the evidence to the table so she can make the final decision on the immunity case. And that's going to cause Donald Trump and the prosecution to expose everything before the case even starts. That's not something Donald Trump wants to have happen. So I don't know how this is all going to turn out. But in terms of defenses in his other trials, I think the immunity clause is basically all he's got. I mean, what else could you have in a case in Georgia where you have the defendant committing the crime in an audio recording? You better get immunity, because that's proof positive that he committed the crime. It'll be a lot like the Manhattan District. There'll be a lot of evidence. He won't be able to fight against it. He'll make up some bullshit. He'll try to say he's immune, but ultimately, the Supreme Court will not find that he has immunity, whether they decide it or send it back to Judge Chutkin. He does not have immunity. He will not get immunity. And this is all just about wasting time. This is what the Supreme Court is doing Donald Trump a solid by giving him some extra time by delaying the decision. You're absolutely right. It is a no-brainer. It's fucking laughable. And this is why we have to take into consideration our problems with the Supreme Court. And this is why once we get the power in the House and the Senate and the Oval Office, we need to fix that shit. We need to do something, because, as I've said many times, without a solid or credible Supreme Court, it's hard to maintain a democracy. Thank you, Scott. Next one up. Hello, Boomer. Your TikTok podcast supplements work for me. I gave up TikTok last year, finding it too addictive. I followed you over from TikTok to your podcast and thought I was getting the full Rational Boomer essence. However, your TikTok segments provide your full fire and spunk. Excuse me. Keep it going and help me keep the hell off TikTok, especially leading into the election season. Thanks, Paul. Well, Paul, I'll do the best I can. It's really not that hard to do. It takes a little time, but I'm fucking retired. I got all kinds of time. All right. Next one says, hi, Mike. I'm sure the doom and gloom crowd will move the goalposts back again. The Trumplefucks are losing their shit. So far, no violence, though. Meal Team 6 and the Gravy Seals must be busy at the Golden Corral. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Everybody kept talking about, oh, there's going to be a civil war. Don't you dare convict him, or shit's going to fly. We haven't seen anything. And that's what I told you would happen. They haven't been showing up to the trials. The few people that do are just goofballs. They're not dangerous. You got to remember, a lot of those dangerous fucks are already in jail. They've got no support in the White House, in the DOJ, or any place, or in Congress, because they're too afraid to do anything more because they're already on the hook for January 6th. So, yeah, there's not going to be any violence. Donald Trump got 34 convictions. And what happened? Nothing. Nothing. Because they're bullies, but they're also cowards, and they're scared to death. And you know what? They should be scared to death, because if they tried to pull that shit like they did on January 6th again, it's going to be an awful sight for Trumplefucks. The email goes on. Our unfortunate Governor Kim Reynolds, of course, called the trial a sham, etc. Unfortunately, we have at least 2 more years with that sorry excuse for a governor. The only good thing about her is she isn't Greg Abbott or Ron DeSantis. I was talking with a couple of coworkers today about how every celebrity seems to have a cologne or perfume now. I suggested that this could be Trump's next grift. This scent would probably be a combination of day-old French fries, Big Macs, and dirty diapers. Sounds like an interesting combo, and sounds like Donald Trump. CNN was reporting that Trump could still possibly vote for himself in Florida. Apparently, Florida law only limits the voting rights of felons convicted of state crimes. In other states, if that state has taken away their right to vote. CNN said New York only takes away the voting rights of felons while they're in prison. Thanks, Eric. Okay, so we got some clarification there. So um, New York has to take the rights away from him, but he has to be in jail. If they don't take the rights away from him, then technically he can vote in Florida. But again, who cares? Who cares what Donald Trump does? Donald Trump's vote can't help anything, certainly not himself. All right, next one comes from Deborah. I follow you on TikTok. It's so refreshing seeing an intelligent white man who shares the truth. I grew up conservative, evangelical Republican with a pastor father. He's 83 and a major Trump supporter. Trump has torn my family apart. I miss the father, mother, and siblings of my youth before Fox News and Trump destroyed their brains. I'm a liberal atheist now with 3 degrees. I'm an investigator for security clearances. If you want to know how they work, please contact me. Deborah. Well, Deborah, if you ever want to come on the show, you got to email me at rationalboomer@gmail.com. Um, that would be interesting to find out what that's about and how that works. So feel free to email me. And if you got some time, you can come on the show and we can explain it to everybody. All right, we've got to get another email from Panzer. You remember him. He says, Hi, Mike. I have an important message for all Republicans out there. Guilty 34 times. This is all fake news, a hoax, and a witch hunt. True Republicans know that this trial was rigged. Everybody was corrupt. The judge was corrupt. The jury was corrupt. The lady in the newsstand was corrupt. The cook in the cafeteria was corrupt. The doorman was corrupt. The TV cameraman was corrupt. The cleaning staff was corrupt. Barack Obama was corrupt. The aliens were corrupt. The passing pedestrians were corrupt. Even the dogs in Central Park doing their business were corrupt. Donald Trump said it, so it's true, and it's easy for him to recognize his own kind. Go MAGA, Panzer. Thank you, Panzer. I appreciate it. All right, the next one. Hi, Mike. Gigi from Massachusetts. I just wanted you to know I sent you a pin. I figured we needed something to represent us here on the blue side of life. I feel like the red hat army is always throwing their cap in our face, so this is my answer to that. I do believe that the left have bigger hearts and care about their fellow humans, so I created a blue dot with a heart. Well, that sounds kind of cool, actually. Thanks for keeping me sane in the insane times. Keep up the fight. Best, Gigi. Haven't got the pin yet, but I'll check the P.O. box and we'll feature it on the show here for those people watching the video version on YouTube. Thank you very much, Gigi. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to that pin. That's a good idea. Actually, a very good idea. All right, the next one comes from, I think this is the last email. This one comes from CJ. What are your thoughts on MAGA Mike Johnson and his claim on fake Fox News that he's personal friends of one or more of the Supreme Court justices and had asked them to interfere in the New York State case? I believe it 100%. Mike Johnson is a religious zealot, and we've got a couple of religious zealots on the Supreme Court. Yeah, it's conceivable. And I think he would be dumb enough to ask them. Hopefully, they're smart enough to not respond or at least tell them what the truth is. The Supreme Court has no authority over New York State Court. As much as Mike Johnson would like to think that, he should know otherwise. I believe he's an attorney. And if he's an attorney, he should know better than that. But again, it never really has anything to do with truth or substance. It's just what they want. They hope for it. They think they can try to pull a fast one, and maybe that's what he's trying to do. Wouldn't surprise me at all that he knows members of the Supreme Court. And yeah, he probably did that. I think he probably did. All right. So the ink wasn't even dry on the jury sheet declaring former President Donald Trump guilty of 34 felonies when his right-wing allies started vowing revenge. You notice that? That's all they do. That's all they ever do. They never do anything for the country. They never do anything for the people. It's always about revenge and owning the libtards. All right, Megyn Kelly was on Sirius. They're the wolves with bloody piece of meat in their mouths. That doesn't stop the wolf from coming back for more. The only thing that will stop him is if he loses a limb of his own. What the fuck is that? Now, despite the gruesome imagery, Kelly stressed that she wasn't talking about violence. Rather, she said she was referring of a tit for tat in which Republican officials passed new laws to allow the prosecution of old crimes that Democrats, including Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton, surely committed. Well, that's well and good. I would have to think, however, even if you did pass a new law where you could get Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, it would have to be beyond the statute of limitations, don't you think? I mean, Hillary Clinton, that goes back a long time because they would have had to get her for something pre 2016 election. So, say 2015, we're talking 9 years, almost 10 years. That's the closest one. Barack Obama would go back even farther. See, again, they know this doesn't work. This is all about revenge for them. And what's so silly about it is they keep going for revenge. Donald Trump gets impeached, so they're going to impeach Joe Biden, but it doesn't work. They get embarrassed, but they still do other shit. They investigate this, investigate that, tell Alvin Bragg he's got to come testify. Alvin Bragg tells him to pound fucking sand, but they keep doing this stuff. They tried to do it to Fonnie Willis. She told him to fuck off. They just keep doing this. And that's the whole basis of the Republican Party. It's about revenge and about owning the libtards. And frankly, as of late, they haven't been too successful. Now, Kelly wasn't alone in calling for retributional criminal charges against Democrats. Representative Mike Collins declared, "Time for red state AGs and DAs to get busy." Yeah. And far right commentator Matt Walsh called for Republicans to make lists of which Democrats they will have arrested, and for Trump specifically to publish a list of 10 high ranking Democratic criminals who he will have arrested when he takes office. The first two names Walsh said ought to be Joe and Hunter Biden. Well, he's not going to get elected. You can keep saying he's going to be elected, but he's not. I would bet the house on that. Now, Charlie Kirk, the millionaire MAGA influencer and founder of the conservative youth organization Turning Point, fumed that we must defeat these savages before calling on conservative prosecutors across America to seek revenge. How many Republican DAs or AGs have stones? Kirk wrote. We aren't a serious political movement until we are ready to fight fire with fire, indict the left, or lose America. Tucker Carlson warned his nearly 13 million viewers on X that Trump's conviction opened the door for him to be assassinated. Yeah, I thought we discussed that. Import the third world. Become the third world, Carlson wrote. That's what we just saw. This won't stop Trump. He will win the election if he's not killed first. But it does mark the end of the fairest justice system in the world. Anyone who defends this verdict is a danger to you and your family, says the guy who got fired from his job for talking shit. Now, Trump's allies may have been taking cues from the man himself. Trump's campaign wrote in a fundraising email after the verdict, "Now it's time for me and you to shove it back in their corrupt faces." You mean like you asking people to come out and protest and fight like hell? Yeah, they're not doing that anymore. Donald Trump has lost a lot of sway in this country. They aren't reacting the way he wants to react, and there isn't going to be new laws for old crimes that they allege. How do I know this? Well, they don't control the Senate. The Democrats do. They have a slim margin in the House. How are they going to pass any laws? They can't pass any fucking laws. They haven't done anything. So go ahead and rant and rave about this shit, but we know who you are and that you're not capable of accomplishing anything. Now, the campaign's communications have repeatedly referred to the former president as a political prisoner. Trump also reshared a video on Truth Social in which he promised to liberate Americans from these villains once and for all. You got to get to be president, though, and you're not. Now, some commentators seem to call for their audiences to fight back against the guilty verdict. We're wounded as a country, Fox News host Jesse Waters said, and we're not going to go down. We're going to get back up. No, you're not. You've been knocked on your ass, and you have no way to get back up. He says, we're going to regain our strength, and then we're going to vanquish the evil forces that are destroying this republic. Sounds like a fucking Marvel movie. And frankly, you guys haven't been able to accomplish anything. You're getting your ass kicked, and you're going to continue to get your ass kicked until you're pounded into an oil spot in Washington, D.C. Molly Hemingway, the editor in chief of the Federalist, referred to the trial's outcome as Democrats hate and almost incomprehensibly dangerous. Do we hate Donald Trump? Fuck yeah, we hate Donald Trump. We hate anybody that tries to overturn elections and undermine democracy. All honest people must fight it, she wrote. Others called for going after the jurisdictions in which Trump faces legal consequences. If New York were a country, the U.S. would be imposing sanctions, Senator Mike Lee of Utah wrote. No, they wouldn't. You don't have the power in the House and the Senate and in the presidency. There'd be no sanctions. And it is the most important thing about this is New York isn't a country. It's one of the United States. One of the United States. See, they talk so much shit. They know so little, or maybe they do know. And it's just silly. The whole fucking thing is just silly. They're going to rant and rave for a while, and then something else will come along that they will bitch about, and they'll try to investigate somebody else, and they will fail. And it's like the apple dumpling gang out there. Everything they do, everything they try fails, and they look stupid in the process, yet they keep still doing it. All right, we were talking about this earlier. Now, Mike Johnson says that the Supreme Court should intervene in former President Donald Trump's business fraud case. This is what he says, even though he knows better. I do believe the Supreme Court should step in, Johnson said on Fox News the day after Trump was found guilty. Trump said Friday he would appeal his felony convictions, the first ever for a former president, and he will appeal them to the New York Appellate Court. Johnson said, this is totally unprecedented and it's dangerous to our system. This is diminishing the American people's faith in our system of justice itself. And to maintain a republic, you have to have that. People have to believe that justice is fair, that there's equal justice under the law. I'll just say this. We do have problems with people's trust in justice in this country and the Department of Justice and our courts, including the Supreme Court. But it has nothing to do with this trial. It has everything to do with the way Republicans have behaved for the last 8 fucking years, or maybe even beyond that. We do have a problem, but you're hitting the wrong source for that problem. Johnson said he thought at least some of the court's justices were worried by the case. I bet they are. They're corrupt, criminal, creepy motherfuckers. The justices on the court, I know many of them personally. I think they're deeply concerned about that as we are, he said. Well, they can be concerned, but they have no jurisdiction. They have no authority. Now, the verdict came after a weeks-long trial that saw former porn actor Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen testify. Now, the appeals process will likely be a long one. But Johnson, a constitutional lawyer. Yeah, he's a fucking lawyer, and he doesn't know. And he helped to craft the rationale used by some Republicans for keeping Trump in office. How did he do there? He was one of the architects to keep Donald Trump in office in 2020. How did that work? Do you think it's going to work now? I don't have a lot of confidence in you, Mike. Now, Mike Johnson says, this will be overturned, guys. There's no question about it. It's just going to take some time to do it, he said. It's not going to be overturned. There's no way it's going to be overturned. And you're right, it's going to take a long time, well past the election, well past Donald Trump getting his ass kicked. well past Donald Trump being relevant in politics in this country and in the Republican Party. You can spew your bullshit, but it's not going to work. Donald Trump lost. He lost big, and it's fucking over. We're going to wind down this with kind of an interesting story. Former President Trump's campaign sent a cease and desist letter to House Freedom Caucus Chair Bob Good's he's a Republican from Virginia, his reelection campaign to stop producing yard signs and other merchandise that imply his backing of the congressman. Bob Good, a Republican in the House, head of the Freedom Caucus, is saying Donald Trump supports him. And now Donald Trump and his campaign are saying, stop that shit. Get that shit out. We don't support you. Why not? The Trump campaign sent the letter on Friday. A senior Trump campaign official confirmed to The Hill. It was sent after Good's campaign utilized the former president's image, name, and the president's past support of the candidates to boost his reelection chances. Now, what's really behind this? Donnie wants a taste. That's what he wants. Remember, he said that earlier. If you're going to use my name, you better cut me in on the fundraising. And I'm sure Bob Good, being a slimy Republican, conveniently forgot that he owed Donald Trump money. Donald Trump's mad, so he sent out a cease and desist letter. So now that Bob Good will go into his coffers and send Donnie a little bit of money. Don't you love how politics run? Now, Donald Trump's attorney in this situation said, to be clear, neither you nor your campaign are authorized to use President Trump's name or the campaign's to falsely imply their support of your candidacy. That was said by attorney David Warrington. Nor are your campaign, nor you or your campaign authorized to claim that you represent or otherwise associated with President Trump or the campaign. Seems weird, doesn't it? He's a Republican. He's a supporter of Donald Trump. He's a Trump humper. He's a MAGA fuck. And he's head of the Freedom Caucus. And Donald Trump says, you can't use my name because I don't necessarily support you. Well, if Donald Trump doesn't support MAGA, who the fuck does he support? This has more to do with money than it does support. And he's trying to put some pressure on him, strong arm him into getting some money out of his coffers. Excuse me. Now, the letter just came days after Trump announced his endorsement of Virginia Senator John McGuire, Good's primary challenger, who is looking to beat the House lawmaker in June 18 primary. Apparently, John McGuire is going to kick into Donald Trump's campaign because this is about money. It goes on to say, producing and displaying materials that give the false impression that President Trump is supportive of your candidacy is a fraud on the voters of Virginia's 5th Congressional District, the letter said, which also featured a photo of campaign sign with Trump's name placed right above Good. It is an abuse of the voters' trust to make such false statements. Wow, Republicans worried about the trust of voters. Further, if you're using President Trump's name, image, or likeness in any of your fundraising materials, implying that he supports your campaign, that is fraud and the donors. And we want our cut. In his endorsement of McGuire Tuesday on Truth Social, Trump referenced Good's past backing of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis during the 2024 GOP presidential election. Oh, that's another part of it. He backed Ron DeSantis. But he bet on the wrong horse because that fucking horse pulled up lame. And Donald Trump never forgets. He's a vengeful motherfucker. Now, when DeSantis exited the race, the House Freedom Caucus chairman switched to backing Trump. He was supporting DeSantis, and then he flip-flopped and said, okay, now I like Trump again. Trump said Bob Good is bad for Virginia and bad for the USA. He turned his back on our incredible movement and was constantly attacking and fighting me until recently when he gave a warm and loving endorsement. But really, it was too late. The damage had been done. Now, the Republicans' website displays endorsements from other lawmakers such as Rand Paul, Matt Gaetz. Oh, those are great endorsements, aren't they? Good has shown support for Trump traveling to New York in mid May to offer backing at the Manhattan courthouse. Former president is eventually, obviously, found guilty. And Bob Good has not gotten back in the good graces of Dirty Diaper Donnie Trump. That can't help Bob Good's case in Virginia as he's running for the House of Representatives. He says Donald Trump supports him. Donald Trump goes on blast and says, I don't like the guy. I don't support him. I don't endorse him. And nobody in Georgia should vote for him. Nice move, Bob. Good move. All right, we're going to wrap things up here pretty quickly. But first, Michael Cohen said that people should fear loose lipped former President Donald Trump being jailed after his Thursday conviction because he could spill U.S. secrets that could jeopardize national security. I think that is a serious concern. Cohen, who's Trump's former fixer and star witness, he's worried about Trump leaking classified information for financial benefits or just bragging rights. You now have a Republican leading candidate who's a felon who's going to be debriefed on national security issues, knowing how loose lipped he is, Cohen said during his Saturday appearance on MSNBC. How he's willing to give away America's secrets to Vladimir Putin or to anybody for money or just simply for bragging rights. He did it with the Australian billionaire at Mar-a-Lago. He sat there in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin talking about national security issues, but nobody was around except for Vladimir Putin's translator. Cohen, who's vocal Trump critic, obviously said Trump would give away secrets since he does not care about the country. I mean, these are not normal things, Cohen said. You do not allow somebody like Donald Trump to be declassified, especially now as a felon. So my concern is in a prison situation, he's willing to give away these secrets. As I always say, for a bag of tuna or a book of stamps, he'll do it because he does not care. If America turns against him, he'd rather see America burned to the ground, he said. And that's who Donald Trump is. Well, I think that's probably true. And that's got to be a concern. We've talked about that. Is he going to be debriefed if he becomes the nominee? Theoretically, he's supposed to be, but I've got to think there's going to be a fight against that, given his track record and given what he's been charged with. I know as a former president, he was supposed to get debriefed on some things, and I think Joe Biden put a stop to that. He said, no, he's not going to get that. So I'd be surprised if he gets debriefed if, in fact, he becomes the nominee. Still, it's of concern, and we should be ready to protect ourselves, protect our country from this loose-lipped piece of shit. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.